Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back, to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us. Let's jump straight into it since we missed last week with no episode. Fight reviews a couple Saturdays ago, December 9th, from the Chase Center in San Francisco, California on DAZN. Devin Haney, probably his best performance to date, if you had to really compare all the other wins he's had so far. Gets the unanimous decision win over Regis Prograis, and Haney is now the WBC 140-pound world champion. We thought Prograis was a boogeyman. You know, maybe he was at one point, and Haney was moving up to 140 pounds. In what I think this was his first fight at 140, and he's fighting a world champion, a guy who, you know, kind of, if you could kind of say, was probably avoided, especially after like a Josh Taylor fight and all that. I mean, I think you did too as well, but I think I picked Haney to win by decision, but I didn't think it was going to be that kind of a performance. Like he didn't knock him out, but he knocked him down. He wobbled him, I think, once or twice after that. Excuse me. Hey. But that was a performance, man. Like, I think Haney took the criticism that he was getting leading up to the fight, and he really like showed, no, like I can fight. You know, maybe this is a sign of things to come in terms of he's obviously a big kid. We saw that after that that I guess he came into fight night like over 20 pounds of rehydration. He weighed like 165 or something, but he made the 140-pound limit. You know, I think, and then obviously you can give me your take on this when I shoot it to you right now. I think with Haney, as he moves up and he's able to fill out a little bit more in these upper weight classes, I think he's gonna have more power. So we didn't really see the power at the 135 and all that. You know, that's what people call him pillow fisted and all that. But I think as he moves up to 140, 147, I think he's gonna have power. What do you think? What do you think about the fight, and then what do you think about that notion?
Yeah, the fight was surprising. I think we thought Prograis was probably not as skillful and as slick as Devin Haney, but I think we all thought that, you know, he was the type of guy that would like kind of give it his all, like go out on his shield and stuff like that. But it's easier said than done, right? If like, you know, if you're constantly throwing a jab or, you know, throwing a punch and you're getting countered all the time, obviously, you know, it's just human nature to, you know, for your body to be like, okay, like, you know, every time I throw something, I'm taking one flush in the face you're not going to want to throw as much, which tend to be the case from Prograis. He didn't really throw an awful lot. You know, from very early on, Jack Reese was going to the corner and kind of speaking to him and speaking to the team and, you know, telling him like, hey, you're taking a lot of punches. You know, I really want to see something from you. And then I think his corner in like round 10 or 11, they kind of told him like, hey, you need to show us something or else we're going to pull you out. And, you know, he kind of went for it in the last couple of rounds, but, you know, Haney was too good. I think the only negative thing I think from Haney is, you know, he doesn't really ever get people out of there. Like you said, he's kind of a little bit, you know, feather-fisted.
I think he showed something though. Like, I even though he didn't get a knockout, like he showed with the knockdown, I think he showed that was huge. And then he wobbled him, I think, once or twice after that throughout the rest of the fight. And I get it in terms of he didn't get the knockout, but I'm trying to get, you know, I'm willing to give him credit on this. I think he showed a lot more than what people expected, especially in his lower weight classes.
No, it was a good performance in terms of he pretty much shut him out, didn't he? I think he pretty much won every single round, and you know, what he's doing is unbelievable, really, for someone of his age.
Yeah.
You know, to get in there against, you know, seasoned campaigners like he has been and, you know, really kind of taking them apart and stuff like that. And, you know, not really giving them a round. But I just think that we need to see some more knockouts. And he did rock Prograis like once or twice, and I would have liked to have seen him jump on him, but he seems to have that style of, I'd rather win than kind of like, he didn't want to jump in there, just in case, Prograis taking so many, just throws. Throws a random punch and, gets caught.
Regis still has power. That's the thing,
Yeah, but it's just why we watch it. We watch sports, and we're going to be talking about a fight that happened yesterday coming up, where somebody was winning every minute of every single round and then ended up getting knocked out. And, that's why we like boxing. That's why we watch it, for those kind of viral moments. And I think if Haney keeps winning by points, I just do wonder, is it going to get to the point where, especially with these American fans, is if it's just round after round after round, people will start to boo. People won't want to watch, unfortunately. But he's definitely skillful. And, it's going to be interesting to see that, like a couple of years ago when we were chatting to, Kevin Aioli, and we were talking about these guys coming through, Haney, Shakur, Teofimo Lopez, Ryan Garcia, like who did we think was going to be the pick of the bunch? And at the minute, it's looking, a close run between Shakur and Devin.
Yeah, and I honestly think between 135, obviously all inclusive of 135, but between 135 and 140, all those guys in between those weight classes, you got the Haneys, the Lomachenkos, the Tank Davis, Ryan Garcias, Regis Prograis, pretty much that whole weight class in between those 5 pounds. If you had to pick somebody who's like developing I don't want to say developing because he's not a prospect anymore, but like in terms of getting the most bang for your buck out of increasing your boxing skill and really fighting the best and getting prominent wins that are really leveling you up to the next fight, I think you would have to go with Devin Haney in terms of the resume, in terms of opponents in the last couple of years, right? I mean, if you put him up against Tank Davis's resume of opponents the last couple of years, you put him up against, maybe Lomachenko, but like, I'm talking about like, victories. Who else could you put? I mean, Haney has been showing that he's willing to fight the best. I mean, he went to Australia a couple times and beat Kambosos twice or 3 times or whatever it was. Then he fought Lomachenko. I think he's been showing he's like exactly what we want. I mean, how many fighters are out there doing that? Like we've talked about, obviously Canelo. Canelo's always been showing that he's willing to fight the best. Whether he wins or loses, he puts it out there. In a way, the monster, he shows it. I mean, I think it's time to give Haney his due and throw him into that limited group of fighters, right? I mean, because that's what boxing fans want, right? You want them to fight the best guys or the champions and really go for it. That's what we want to see, entertainment. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think you're probably right in terms of, people fighting on the resumes. I was just trying to think, obviously it's probably a little bit of a longer list than say like Teofimo Lopez. Obviously, he lost to Kambosos, but he's been in there with like Josh Taylor and, Richard Comey. Shakur's been in there with like Oscar Valdez, which was obviously probably his biggest fight so far. Yeah, Ryan Garcia's been in with Gervonta, and then Oscar Duarte is not much of a name just yet. Yeah, I'd probably say you're right in terms of those guys, the 4 kings, the 4 princes. The guys that are really coming up.
He was undisputed at 135. I mean, legit undisputed. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I think we both thought he lost to Lomachenko, but on box records,
that was still a close fight. Like I know we talked about it then, but like I never looked at that fight as like, oh, this was, I thought it was close enough where I was like, yeah, you know what? I can see how somebody can give it to Haney, but you got to give it to him, man. Especially like you said, he's so young. He's what, 25, and he's showing he wants to be great. He's showing he wants to be great, and I think that he's disciplined, and now that he's going up in weight, I think he's getting comfortable at these higher weight classes, and he's filling out, and he's showing like, oh, okay, I can, these are my sweet spots. Like if he rehydrated to 165 from 140 24 hours later, think about what he could do at 147. You know, him and his dad, Bill Haney, did say, and they have been saying, like, yeah, we might go up to 147 after this. You know, think about it.
It's gonna be interesting because, you know, hopefully, you know, from his last couple of performances, he seems to be the one that's, you know, calling people out or responding to people on, you know, Twitter or X as it's now called. But the fights are actually coming to fruition. So I know obviously he's been chatting to, like, you know, was it Gervonta Davis last night? And supposedly he'd said to, you know, Conor Benn, because Conor Benn, obviously the Chris Eubank Jr. fight seems to have fallen through. So I saw Eddie was saying in a couple of interviews that Conor and, you know, Devin Haney had kind of gone back and forth on Twitter, and he'd reached out to Devin, and Devin was like, yeah, I'll go to the UK, I'll fight him. Obviously February might be a little too close for that, but yeah, you know, if he's traveling to Australia, the UK, you know, fighting in different cities in the US, then yeah, all props to him, because, you know, as a fight fan, that's what we want to see. You know, like win, lose or draw, we want those guys to do that. Yeah, no, yeah, he's a template, man. He's on a limited list. Him, Canelo, Inoue, Bam Rodriguez, who we'll touch on in a second. Like, you know, these guys, they're fighting the best fighters in the world. Like, they're really trying to make those fights. I mean, look at Haney. He was with Matchroom and Eddie Hearn for a while in DAZN, and then he went to Top Rank for a couple fights because he wanted to be undisputed. Then he comes back to Matchroom. Like, you know, he's showing it. And these are all risks. They're all risks that he's taking. But that just shows the confidence that him and his dad have together. Like, no, we're going to go do this. You know, you got to give it to him, man. You got to give it to him, you know? And I know, like you said, him and Tank Davis have been going back and forth the last couple of days, and then Ryan Garcia chimed in and all that. And then I saw Leonard Ellerby throw some stuff out there saying that, you know, Tank is the A side. He has to look at. I agree with that, because it's always been like that. You know, it's unfortunate for fans because it makes it a little bit more difficult to make these fights, especially cross-promotional fights. But I mean, Mayweather did it. He went across and fought De La Hoya. He had to bend to De La Hoya's demands, you know, for that fight. De La Hoya was the A side. Same thing for De La Hoya Pacquiao. Canelo did it with Mayweather. You know, like it's always got to that point. And, you know, I get it, man. Like, and it's unfortunate, but that's just how the boxing business has always been. You know, it's not the UFC where, you know, there's one entity. Like, there's multiple different promotional companies here. So, you know, I know they still deserve to get paid, and Haney's still going to find a way to get paid and stuff like that. But, you know, if Haney does what Ryan Garcia did and goes and fights Tank Davis, and Tank Davis puts all the stuff that he wants to put on in the contract and stuff, and Haney wins, just imagine how big that would be. 50,000 pay-per-views was the reported number for Haney.
Who reported that? Rick Glazer?
Of course.
Maybe. Could be. I mean, well, that's the thing. These pay-per-view market, like, you know, I feel like we've been talking about this topic for so long. It's ad nauseum. Like, you know, it'd be funny that, like, these networks or these TV networks, like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, if you had these fights that did like 50,000, they'd be like, oh no more pay-per-views. Like, but we've been seeing more and more and more of these fights because that's the only way that they can recoup any money because of the purses that they're paying. You know, they're like, hey, even if we, like, you know, we sell 50,000 or something, it's a horrible number, but, you know, I mean, really, is that surprising? Like, Prograis and Haney aren't really names. Like, you know, like, look at Davis. Like, and honestly, all these pay-per-view numbers that we've always seen, even going back years, like, they're all like, we don't even know if they're completely accurate. We don't. Like, we say them because we see these and we see these reporters. But if you look at the pattern of pay-per-view numbers over the years, whenever you see multiple reporters or journalists from all these different little sites report something, you always like, oh, okay, they obviously got some information. But then when you don't see the number come out from those traditional channels and it comes out from somebody else, like a Rick Glazer or somebody else, then you got to think about, like, oh, I wonder why these reporters didn't get the number. Like, did their source not talk this time, or did somebody not reach out to them? Like, you know, you also got to look at, like, there's like a relationship in that media sphere. You know, the network or the promotional company, if they have some type of proud notion behind the pay-per-view performance, they're going to float that number to whoever they feel is on their side. You know, whatever reporter, journalist. That's how the game works. You know, in any type of news agency, and then they're going to report that. Be like, oh, sources say this is what this number did. You know, like you always have to take these pay-per-view numbers with a grain of salt. You really do. You know, and I think the best performing pay-per-view of the last couple of years probably was Davis Garcia, wasn't it? Like if you really had to like do an educated guess, it probably was, even though we don't know the actual accurate number. If you had to put a guess, Davis Garcia was probably the best performing pay-per-view fight of the last couple of years.
100% easily.
Right?
Yeah. 100%
you know, and that's just because like, you know, we're obviously in the know here. Like, you know, we're talking about this on a weekly basis. So, yeah, it's just these pay-per-view numbers, you know, if it is 50,000 for Haney-Prograis, I mean, that's not surprising. I don't think anybody expected this fight I think if this fight did 100,000, I think that would be a success, at least from afar, right?
Not boxing related, but pay-per-view related. I was watching the UFC last night, and after the fight, they did the post-fight, and they were chatting to Dana, and they were saying that Colby Covington's comments about Leon Edwards' father on the pay-per-view that week, after he said it, you know, he said something about Leon Edwards' dad obviously was killed. He made a comment about that. The UFC pay-per-view spike of sales increased 25%.
That's insane. Hey, people look at regardless of that statement. It's, you know, it is what it is. That show, people love drama.
Mm-hmm.
People love drama. If that's really true what Dana White is saying, and obviously he can say whatever he wants, you know, he's good on the mic like that. But if that is actually true, assuming all the other encompassing reasons, you know, like that's producing results. You know, I mean, do you want to encourage your fighters on stuff to do that stuff? You know, that's a conversation for another day. But people love drama. That's why all these, you go to the grocery stores and stuff like that, and you see these tabloid magazines right there in line with all this stuff about celebrities and stuff like that. You see these shows about reality TV and celebrities. People love it. They love it. They love watching it. You know, we have a boxing podcast where we talk about these fights and all the time, but we also talk about news that happens to these fighters outside of the ring. You know, that's just the nature of life. People are interested in something to some capacity. Even if people say like, oh no, I'm not like that. Like, you're interested in something. It doesn't matter what it is. There's something out there. It doesn't have to be sports. It doesn't have to be celebrities. It can be like gamers or, you know, whatever, social sciences, politics. There's something out there. And if that's true, like I said, what Dana White said, you know, what can you say to that? You know, they're making money. Yeah, like, was that a good statement that Covington made? No, but what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You know, like, yeah, it's insane, man. Like, it's insane. Like, you have to get people emotionally invested or some type of investment. You do. Like, and it is what it is, you know? And I don't know, maybe it's, I know we're kind of going on a tangent here, but at the UFC, there was like a little fight in the front row between two of the fighters who are probably going to fight later. I saw like clips of that, but then like the UFC actually had cameras on there, like watching them. And people on Twitter or X, they were talking about like, oh, I guess that WWE UFC relationship is finally paying off. That's what I thought too. I was just like, oh, I wonder if this is, you know, you kind of have to think about that now. You know, is this real? You know, like, are you guys just kind of, you know, because the UFC fan base will, if it is staged, quote unquote, the UFC fan base will believe that that's real, because the pro wrestling fan base is not the MMA fan base. They're different. People think there's a crossover. There's kind of not. There is a little bit, but it's not as much as people think. But Yeah, man. Like, look at even Mayweather. Going back to Mayweather, when Mayweather was doing HBO 24/7 after the De La Hoya fight and all that stuff, he did WWE WrestleMania, and then he said in interviews that he had talked to Vince McMahon and Triple H, and they told him like, yeah, man, play up your character, play a part. And look, he got that Money Mayweather persona, and he was on all the HBO 24/7s and stuff like that, and people hated him. But he probably made more money from the people who hated him because they wanted to pay to see him lose. That's just the nature of the game. You have to get people emotionally invested in some way or form, right? I mean, you can still make good money. Obviously, these fighters the last several years are, they're not globally known, but they're still making millions of dollars. But if you really want to reach that next echelon, you have to have some type of X factor. You just have to. Yeah. But for Haney, where do you think Haney goes next? It's not going to be Davis, even though they're talking. I could see Ryan Garcia. I don't want to see Ryan versus Rolly. I do not want to see that. If Haney is saying, like, let's do it, give me Haney, Ryan, and I think Haney beats him easily.
I think they want, like, Golden Boy. They want Rolly.
Because Rolly's an easier target and he has a title.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be a real world title to win off of Rolly. Because Rolly, if you go back to his last fight, a lot of people think he lost that fight.
Mm.
But Rolly is an easier target.
It's a hard one because it's like, I could see them, because you've got to think of the business side of it as well. It's like, okay, Ryan's not going to publicly turn down Haney, but is Haney all wrong for him? Slick boxer, moves.
I think Haney's all wrong for him. Haney's all wrong for a lot of guys right now.
Same as Conor Benn. Conor Benn's more of a straightforward, come forward fighter, brawler, strong, kind of relies on that. And I think Haney's all wrong for Conor Benn. So like, if you're Matchroom, you kind of think to yourself, all right, we've invested a lot of money in Conor Benn. Like, that's why they wanted the Eubank fight, because obviously that was going to be huge in the UK.
Yeah, that was their payoff.
Yeah. So I think Conor Benn's going to go down the Mario Barrios route, and then Haney, I imagine, will probably be out till Easter, maybe even summer. And then hopefully it's one of those big names,
Yeah, I think Haney's all wrong for a lot of guys right now. He really is.
We'd like to see him in with one of those guys you mentioned, like a Ryan.
Well, yeah, but I honestly, looking from the outside in, I think Haney really has proven that he really wants to make these big fights. He's not really just throwing it out there like for clout. Like, I really do believe like he might be giving it a shot.
Because look at, for example, we're going to talk about this. It's on the news and the notes, but Teofimo Lopez keeps calling out all these people, demanding.
He's always been like that.
Demanding 10 million to fight, and then he's now just.
But honestly, when you fight under Top Rank's got a pretty good understanding of the business. Like, they're gonna put him where they think he needs to go. Like, and if Bob Arum, if he's stubborn, like he's gonna be like, okay, well, you're not gonna fight then. Yeah.
It's an interesting one because there's two sides to everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think Haney's the guy right now.
Yeah.
Like, him in a Tank Davis fight, him in a Shakur fight, him and Tank Davis, I think is the best fight to make between 135 and 140, money wise and skill wise. I think that's the best fight to make.
Yeah, I mean, pay-per-view wise, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best fight to make. Yeah, that's a good fight. Moving on, this past Saturday, the 16th of December, from the Desert Diamond Arena in Glendale, Arizona, on DAZN, back-to-back weekends for DAZN, Jesse Bam Rodriguez remains undefeated and becomes a unified IBF and WBO flyweight champion of the world as he gets the stoppage win, over Sonny Edwards, whose corner stopped it after the, I believe, 9th round. Edwards takes the first loss of his professional career. This was one fight that we have been looking forward to for months. For a long time. It's been marinating. I thought Bam Rodriguez was winning a majority of the fight, and obviously knocked him down in this last round. And then it was over. His Sonny Edwards' corner stopped it in the corner, but Edwards, I think, still gave a great effort, and it was a good fight, man. There was a lot of drama. They were both going at it. You know, those lower weight classes, they can move. They got a lot of speed. Hey, man, that was a great fight. I was a fan. What did you think?
For a fight that was kind of one-sided, it was good. Because, you know, Sonny was, you know, kept throwing back. At times he would try to, you know, like try to back up, you know, Bam, because Bam just kept coming forward. But he just didn't have the power. And I think everybody thought the same thing. They kind of thought Sonny was going to be elusive. But he didn't. He kind of like tried to stand in the pocket and actually trade with Jesse, which was completely the wrong idea. But, you know, they interviewed Sonny afterwards and he said that, well, I couldn't really be elusive because, you know, Jesse had good footwork. So he said the only thing I could really kind of do was, you know, do what he did and try to stay in the pocket and make him miss and counter in that way. But, you know, Bam was unbelievable. What was it, like over 60% connection rate?
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
Hey, that Robert Garcia gym, I mean, you can't deny it, man. That place gives you work.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It is, you know, they've got a whole host of killers in there. You know, Bam's getting unbelievable sparring. And he's one of those next upcoming guys. Like you said, you know, you've got like your Haney, you've got Bam, who's only 23. It's going to be interesting to see what he does in those divisions, you know. You've got like flyweight, super flyweight. You could even see him probably move up to like bantamweight. And, you know, people were already calling for him to fight in Inoue because obviously those weight divisions, you know, are kind of close together, right? You know, you're looking at like 2 or 3 pounds incremental, you know, move ups when they change division, you know, at the lighter weights. But, you know, slowly but surely, you know, Inoue's got a fight coming up against Marlon.
At 122, too. It's 10 pounds more.
Yeah, you know, with Marlon Tapayas, and then, you know, let him unify. There's a good whole host of names down there. Carlos Cuadras, you got Estrada, Chocolatito. Lots of great fights, really, for
yeah,
Bam.
No, Jesse Rodriguez can be between 112, 115 right now for a while because he's still got some names that he can make some good fights with, and you know, he makes some pretty good money with.
Yeah, and I thought Sonny did his job beforehand, you know, trying to sell it. Obviously, you know, fight week he kind of upped it a little bit, was talking a little bit of shit. But I like the fact that he was like super respectful afterwards, you know, just instead of like making a whole host of excuses and kind of being childish about it, he just said, yeah, you know, I lost to the better man on the night, shook hands, and I thought that was, you know, respectful towards, you know, Bam, and, you know, didn't try to kind of take away the light that was on Bam, you know, on that night for becoming a unified world champion. And you could see what it meant to Bam. You know, he literally threw himself on the floor afterwards. He was kind of happy from, you know, for winning, and, you know, hopefully seeing that and being in the corner. Hopefully, you know, we see Joshua Franco back. You know,
right.
He was in the corner, and, you know, he's taken an early retirement due to some mental health issues. And, you know, hopefully that reignites his fire and we see him back, because he's still super young.
Right. Yeah. No, Jesse Bam Rodriguez, I mean, Robert Garcia and his team have been saying it for years. Like in interviews, you look at past interviews with different outlets, Robert Garcia has always said that he's like, Jesse Bam Rodriguez is my guy. He's like, you talking about like the next guy, he's a killer. And he's been like, he's been right, man. Like, I know it's the lower weight classes, it's not as glamorous, but in terms of like pound for pound, yeah, Bam Rodriguez has been showing that he can fight. That kid's a killer, man. And Sonny Edwards, you gotta give it to him too, man. You know, I think that if you look at it this way, Sonny Edwards, in terms of, even though he was on the losing end of this fight, if he goes up against any other fighters, you'd probably have to give the edge to Sonny Edwards just because of the fights he's been in, especially after one like this against such a highly skilled guy in Bam Rodriguez. You know, you learn something from every fight, whether it's a win or loss. So, yeah, man, that was you know, that's why they make these fights, man. It was an excellent fight. So, you know, maybe Bam Rodriguez fights Cuadras or Juan Francisco Estrada or something next. Maybe Chocolatito. Who knows? But, you know, the thing about these lower weight classes, it's a lot easier to make these fights just because the downfall is that they're not as glamorous as the higher weight classes, but that also helps them make the fights. So there's not too much of politicking going around as much as the higher weight classes, right?
Well, politricks, yeah, as Lennox Lewis used to say.
Exactly. And in the co-main event, MJ Akhmadaliev gets the 8th round TKO over Kevin Gonzalez. MJ gets the 12th win of his career. And then also on the card, Galao Yafai remains undefeated at 6-0 with a unanimous decision win over 10 rounds against Rocco Santamaro. This is for the WBC International Flyweight title. Yafai, his brother just retired, right?
Yeah, Cal. Yeah, Cal was at the event I was at.
Right.
Galal, Olympian, gold medalist. You know, what can you say? You know, 6-0, doing what he should have done. Rocco Santamora, he's local to us. I think he's from Hesperia. One of those guys that just comes in and he's always super fit, super well conditioned when he comes into the fight. I think Galal, if anything negative, maybe could sit down on his punches a little bit more. I think he at times still has a little bit of an amateur style, but you know, super talented. Good win for him if you think about it. You know, facing someone with 25 professional world, 25 fights when Galal's only in his 6th. So yeah, big things for him to come. I'd like to see Matchroom actually push him a little bit more. He kind of like goes under the radar, I think.
Right. Yeah, well, I think they're getting there, and you got to build these guys up. But you're right, though. Like, you know, with his pedigree and what he has his background, you know, try to give him a little bit more exposure. But, you know, it's a process. And rounding off the card, Jericho O'Quinn, 17-101, gets the 5th round KO over Peter McGrail, who takes the first loss of his career. And then also this past weekend from the Armory in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the final Showtime telecast. Ever. Do we want to say ever? You never know. Maybe 10 years from now, they bring it back a little bit. Who knows? But as of right now, it's over. End of an era like HBO was about 5 years ago or so. Almost 5 years. Because I think HBO's last...
Before COVID.
Yeah, it was in 2018. I think it was 2018. It was also, I think, in December. It was right here in Carson, California. It was a female fight.
Clarissa Shields and
Breakus?
Yeah, and Shields was the co-main. The two main events were female.
Yeah. And I think it was in December of 2018. So 5 years almost to the day. Both of the most.
It's funny because there was a Golden Boy event at Fantasy Springs, and everybody went to that.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
I was at the Fantasy Springs event because the fights were better than the one at Carson because they were just, I don't know, they tried to be, I don't know, woke, I guess, and put loads of females on it to try to headline for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a lot more of a chance to make a profit in terms of making money and all that. But the final Showtime telecast, David Morrell gets the TKO over in the second round, remains undefeated at 10-0 over Sean Agbeko, who takes the 3rd loss of his career. This was for the WBA super middleweight title. I'm assuming this was the WBA like regular title or some interim or something, because obviously we know that Canelo is the undisputed 168-pound champion, which is, I think it's just stupid having these belts like that, and it is what it is. But what do you think about the fight?
Big fan of Morrell. I think he's doing everything we expect so far. You know, picked up a WBA trinket. You know, many fights back. You know, and I think they have the good prospect with him. Really, he does. When he gets in there with somebody that we feel that he should beat, he always does it. You know, he always manages to get him people out of there. He made light work of Agbeko pretty easy, 2nd round knockout. And I think PBC so far are pushing him, you know, really well. I think they could maybe do a little bit of better job of promotion because, you know, you don't really hear anybody saying like, "Hey, let's throw him in there with Canelo," and he's at a WBA.
Yeah. I mean, he's only 10-0.
It's just the amateur pedigree that he's had, and
right.
Kind of he's a little bit further ahead than the 10-0 so far. But yeah, I think they've done a good job, and I like to watch him. He's a good fighter.
Yeah, no, he's definitely going to be that next generation. So that I'm interested to see where he goes. I mean, obviously you got the Prime, Amazon, and PBC deal coming up, so we'll see. But I mean, I'm assuming, you know, we're just speculating, but we're assuming Amazon Prime is going to just want like, you know, fights where they can get like a big event feel. And I don't think they're going to want like, and I mean, David Morrell could be on like the undercard and stuff, but I don't think you're going to see a David Morrell headline a Prime card right now. at least not in the near future. So it's going to be interesting to see with these PBC fighters, like especially the ones that aren't Tank Davis, Errol Spence, and stuff like that. Where if they're going to be allowed to by Al Heyman to go to other promoters or other networks to get some fights going, like that's going to be very interesting to see because they don't have the big enough name to headline their own card with Amazon. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. And then also in the co-main event, Jose Valenzuela gets a 6-round KO over Chris Colbert, who takes the second loss of his career. Were you surprised about this matchup?
Not really, because if you remember the first fight, Valenzuela really should have won after dropping Colbert at least once, I think maybe twice, but Colbert won points.
Right.
And obviously that was kind of like a big furore. They kind of like went back and forth in the ring. And, to be fair to Colbert, he was like, hey, well, let's run it back. And then in the press conference this week, they did bet $50,000 on a knockout. Colbert was actually surprisingly the one that, suggested the bet. And, he was the one that actually got knocked out. So, hopefully Colbert.
Let's see if he pays up, though. Let's see if he pays up. Remember the Canelo Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. bet? Like, that was called off.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the thing. Hopefully he's a man of his word since he was the one that actually suggested it, and he pays up. But good win for Valenzuela. Good to kind of right the wrong of the first fight, and also where does he go from now? He's a good fighter. He's heavy-handed. If people remember, he was the guy that supposedly dropped Teofimo Lopez a couple of times in sparring, and I think there was videos on YouTube and stuff like that of the incident. But yeah, I mean, I like to watch him. He's heavy-handed. He kind of always goes for the knockout. He's pure pressure, but at the same time, there is kind of vulnerabilities there. So he's definitely a good TV fighter.
And then also on the card in a fight you thought we would see 10 years ago. This isn't 2012 or 2013. This is 2023. Robert Guerrero, 38-6-1, gets a unanimous decision win over 10 rounds against Andre Berto, who is now 32-6. Maybe this was like a nostalgic fight. Like, hey, let me get one last payday for you guys. I don't know, man. I think it was just kind of like Al Heyman's way of like, hey, one last one on the Final Showtime telecast for you guys. Like what else could you really say about this? Like these guys, their prime and their the prime of their fighting skills was like 10 years ago. So it's what, get them one last payday on the Final Showtime telecast. They can say, oh yeah, I was on the last Showtime telecast. I don't know. It is what it is. But tying a bow on this topic, Showtime final telecast, it's gone. Give me your take on what you think about the whole situation.
Surprising, to see HBO go.
I think when we saw HBO go, though, we've talked about this before. I think everybody knew it was a matter of time before Showtime did it too. Like, I'm surprised they lasted as long as they did, 5 more years, because I thought it was going to be way sooner than that. But I mean, that's what I was thinking the whole time when HBO went out of business.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising when you rewind. You'd have thought like HBO and Showtime, they're so big, so powerful type of channels that you didn't think they'd ever leave the sport, because they kind of had such a cornerstone of it. But I think the way that the world's changed, and like Eddie Hearn said, like many years ago when he started on DAZN, that a lot of things are going to apps now, and that looks to be the way of the future. Even after what PBC said, and people said like, "Oh, I'd never fight on an app." Everyone's going to be, Amazon Prime, DAZN.
Yeah, it was going that way, And it's funny because PBC, a lot, Ellerby and all those guys, they would always talk shit about DAZN being an app. Nobody ever hears Al Heyman say anything. We speculate based on what his people under his banner say. So we think, oh, he probably thinks the same way. But you've never heard the guy say anything. For all we know, the guy could be like, he doesn't agree with anything that they say, but he's like, well, I don't care. I still do my decisions behind the scenes. And maybe that's why he has so much respect from all these fighters and people, because they know like he's a no bullshit guy. But like, I don't know. Like, we had all these guys talking shit about DAZN, and we're never fighting an app. Nobody's going to fight on an app. For all we know, Heyman never thought that. We don't know. We don't know. That's the thing. Like, we all speculate and we say, oh, Heyman this and that. The guy doesn't talk. He's in the shadows. So like everything we talk about is all speculation, and all the opinions that are formed around him and his company are from guys who are connected to his company already, who just like talk all the time. So it's like, it's interesting, man. It's an interesting situation. Showtime's out, man. I mean, what more can you say? But let me ask you this. When boxing went to these premium channels 30 years ago or something, or over 30 years ago to HBO and Showtime, because I've seen this topic before. I forget where I saw it. Do you think that was bad for boxing? And because it went to these premium channels, which were premium for average Americans, middle-class Americans. Like, you had to pay extra in the United States to have these types of channels. It was a premium channel. That's what they called it. So do you think that was bad for the sport in a sense over time?
Probably at the time, but it was the same in the UK. They were always, a lot of fights were on just normal, free terrestrial TV, as we call it in the UK. And then obviously, they all went to like Sky Sports, which is obviously, like you say, it's a premium channel. You have to pay to even own that channel. And then you have to pay even more to watch the pay-per-views. At the time, it probably was a bad thing in terms of, eyeballs on the sports, eyeballs on the fighters. But now, if you probably asked all of your friends and family, everybody owns, Sky Sports or BT or TNT as it is now, or over here, like Dish, Verizon. Pretty much every household kind of has it. So the access is probably not as big as it would have been if it was on a free-to-air channel. But the majority of people have it now, or they have a... they have the Fire Stick. They have some type of illegal way of watching the sport, because it's a hard time in the economy. So a lot of people are, go down that route of paying like $100 a year, and they get all of the channels on a Fire Stick and IPTV, stuff like that. So yes and no. I get, I kind of understand why they went down that route, but in terms of eyeballs on the sport, when you go back to some of the fights, you had millions and millions of people watching it. Every household, because they only had like 4 or 5 channels to watch. So your whole family would watch, some of the Roberto Duran fights back in the day, or stuff like that. So yeah, I mean it's a completely different time, when we've gone from free to air to premium, now to apps. It's just the next generation. Right.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. End of an era. Good luck to all those people who, worked on the Showtime boxing, Showtime sports. It's not that it's just the boxing, it's the sports department for Showtime. Like, they're cutting it all out. So, it's unfortunate, but we didn't start seeing these big fights until this last year for them. It's, the writing was on the wall years ago. Like, I think that they should have sounded the alarm when HBO went down, and I guess it was just too late. So it's unfortunate. But we'll see where everybody lands. And, obviously Heyman's already made a deal with Amazon PBC for some type of rights agreement. But as of right now, we don't really know too many details. It could just be like, hey, who is it? Is it Boxer who struck a deal with like NBC Sports or Peacock or something?
Yeah, Boxer seemed to have some type of deal with a mix.
Yeah, but it seems more like it's like a rights deal, right? It's not like they're getting paid, $100 million. Like, it's probably just kind of like, hey, it's just a partnership. You can air our stuff, but you don't really have to put money into it or something like that. Like,
because the Chris Billum-Smith fight was on Peacock, because I watched that.
Oh, okay.
Peacock.
Yeah. So as of right now, we don't know. Like, the PBC, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Heyman's a lot sharper than that, but, the track record from all these previous television networks isn't good, for PBC. So I would think Amazon would be smart enough to be like, hey, look, we want to make a deal, but, the television track record you have of all these other previous networks hasn't really been good in terms of profitability.
Profitable for Al Heyman, I bet.
Yeah. So, but it is what it is. The guy's always shown that he's able to figure it out. So yeah, he's a sharp guy. Moving on to fight previews. This upcoming Saturday, the 23rd of December, from the Kingdom Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Another fight, huh? On DAZN pay-per-view, Anthony Joshua returns 26-3 as he goes up against Otto Wallin 26-1. Obviously, this fight, like we're going to touch on in a second, well, we'll just might as well throw it in there. Deontay Wilder, 43-2-1, goes up against Joseph Parker, 33-3 in the co-main event. Obviously, the plan is to have them both come out victorious, Joshua and Wilder, and then have them fight sometime next year, right? I mean, that's where you put them both on the card like this, right?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, you had some fake news or early news from Mike Coppinger, who announced that if both of them won, they would be fighting in March, and a deal had already been struck. But they asked Eddie Hearn and some of the people this weekend, and that he said that that's not true.
I mean, dude, what else is he really going to say? Do you really think that's not true? I mean, I think it's implied that it's kind of has some truth to it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You don't want. I would imagine if both of them win, it would be a big announcement. They just did that little commercial, which was very, very well made for this upcoming card, Day of Reckoning. So I'm sure they didn't want kind of like, when Ariel Helwani announced that, Brock Lesnar was going to the UFC and Dana White went crazy, kind of like what Mike Coppinger just did. I'm sure if they're going to do Joshua Wilder, which we've all been waiting years for, I'm sure they'll probably want to do a media day, some sort of video and an announcement, posters and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm sure if Mike Coppinger's 100% correct, they weren't going to just say that. So
right.
But I think Joshua has a tricky fight in Otto Wallin, to be honest with you.
Yeah. If he can fight like he did against Tyson Fury.
Tricky, southpaw. Otto Wallin he's a good fighter. He's a good boxer. It's going to be a tricky fight, especially with AJ's never really looked the same, since the Klitschko fight, and when he fought Andy Ruiz, whenever he gets kind of like any pressure put on him, he seems to crumble a little bit. So if I was Otto Wallin, I would just run at him, kind of put a lot of pressure on him, rough him up and stuff like that. He doesn't seem to really seem to want that. He doesn't train as hard as he used to, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but I was chatting to Robert McCracken at the Matchroom event, and I was asking him, like, hey, what did you think about the Ben Davidson, matchup for this fight, because he couldn't go to Texas because he was training Ryan Garcia, his normal coach, so he ended up staying with Ben Davidson in the UK for this one. And Robert McCracken, his response was pretty much, when you stop putting 100% into training, then that's what performances are going to be like. And that's pretty much what Robert Garcia said about AJ. He kind of dictates what happens in camp. It's not like, hey, AJ, get here at 7, you're going to do your track work, and then you're going to do this, and this. He kind of dictates what happens and stuff like that. So I could see it being a slip up. I honestly could. It's just the sort of thing that would happen, isn't it? We're kind of like, okay, they win, then we get the big fight, and obviously one of them slips up and loses, and then we don't get to see the big Wilder Joshua fight that we've been waiting 5, 6, 7 years for.
Yeah,
but I would like to see the first round, because I would like to see Wallin get in there super confident and just put pressure on him. And I think if he doesn't do that, I think AJ probably wins by maybe a late stoppage, just kind of gets him in the corner, combination punches, and the referee steps in.
What about Wilder versus Parker? Wilder KO?
Yeah, Joseph Parker has probably one of the best managers in the world. How he's managed to have the career that he's had and get all these big fights.
He's had some big fights against the biggest names in the heavyweight division.
He slipped by Andy Ruiz to get the WBO, had a pretty terrible negative performance against AJ. Then he's fought, sneaked by Chisora twice by the skin of his teeth. Was KO'd by Joe Joyce. And then now he's got the Wilder fight. So because he seems to be one of the nicest men in the world, it seems to always get the big fights. And then obviously he's hilarious.
He figures it out, man. He's like Jesse Vargas. Jesse Vargas got a lot of big fights, a lot of big money too.
Yeah, and his hilarious videos during COVID, I think, probably increased his popularity, when he was doing those songs and he was kind of doing little skits. But hey, fair play to him. But yeah, Wilder by KO, and be interesting to see how Wilder looks after being in camp with friend of the show Malik Scott for a long time. They've been working together for a long time now, without any actual fights, pretty much. So it's going to be interesting to see like how what differences he's made under Malik. But yeah, I would go with a Wilder stoppage.
And then also in his first fight since his win over Canelo Alvarez last year, Dimitri Bivol returns to the ring as he goes up against Lyndon Arthur. This is for the WBA and IBO. IBO getting some love, light heavyweight championships of the world. What do you think about this fight? This is actually, Bivol has been out of the ring for so long, and he had such a great year last year against Ramirez, Canelo, and then couldn't. I know he had some other stuff come up, I think domestic stuff, and I think Lyndon Arthur is a pretty decent opponent. I think Bivol is obviously the big favorite, and he's going to win, but what can you do?
No, I agree with you. It's not a bad opponent, but Lyndon Arthur seems to have. He's never really been able to replicate that performance he had against Anthony Yarde when he kind of, what would you call it, a shock? And I was never the biggest fan of Anthony Yarde, but I think a lot of people thought he was going to win that quite easily. And then obviously they did rematch, and Anthony Yarde made quite easy work of Lyndon Arthur in the rematch. But yeah, I think Bivol is probably light years ahead of Lyndon Arthur in terms of boxing IQ and ability, and I think Bivol probably wins that, fairly easily. But yeah, Lyndon Arthur isn't too bad an opponent. This whole card, to be honest with you, is pretty well matched. There's a couple of gimmies, but in terms of names and in terms of people you wouldn't mind watching, it's definitely one where you're going to tune in from pretty much the first fight. Right. Yeah. No, it's Saudi Arabia, man, they have the money to be able to kind of dictate terms. I think they've shown that. Just imagine the locker room. You've got Joshua Wilder, Jarrell Miller. There's a lot of shit talking going on in the locker room, right? You'd think. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. But let's see how Bivol comes. Being so inactive and hasn't been able to get a fight the whole year. But if Bivol still looks sharp and has the skill that he has, I'm telling you, man, Bivol, I think a Bivol David Benavidez fight is a lot more competitive than Canelo David Benavidez, and I think Bivol beats Benavidez, and I can't really say that about Canelo beating Benavidez, but I would, if Bivol's still the same guy, especially after this performance coming up, I think Bivol beats Benavidez, which I don't think that fight happens anytime soon. But competitive wise, I'm telling you, people don't talk about that fight, that potential matchup. Also on the card, like you mentioned, Jarrell Miller goes up against Daniel Dubois. This is a pretty intriguing matchup, too, between these two names, especially with Jarrell Miller's past and association of Joshua and Matchroom. And, hey, you got to give it to him, man. There's some drama here. It's intriguing. No, I think, we've said for the last, ever since Jarrell Miller got banned that he would be back. Unfortunately, we need a villain to the heroes. And as much as people were saying Eddie Hearn and all these promoters were like, oh my God, I would never work with him. He tested positive so many times, and it was stuff that you couldn't possibly drink or take in food. He had to have injected it. Sure as shit, he's back. He's back, and he's back on a big card. And like you said before, it's because you need the fans to have some type of reaction towards you, whether it's they love you and they want you to win and they want you to become a world champion, or if you're the villain. What happens in most fucking superhero films, right? You need a good guy and a bad guy. Right. And that's what Jarrell Miller is. And looking at the press conferences and stuff, he's just rolling in it. He's like, what? I'm the bad guy, is what it is. I'm just going to play that card. And, he was calling out Anthony Joshua, and, weird way, I wouldn't mind seeing him win so we can see him fight AJ, because the build up to that would be funny. AJ would be all over the place and stuff like that. I don't know. I think Dubois probably wins this just due to the fact that Miller had probably been juicing his entire career, right? 300 pounds or something like that, and he's going to gas super flipping fast. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's an intriguing matchup regardless. Also in the card, Jayo Pataya, 23-0, goes up against Ellis Zorro for the IBF Cruiserweight Championship of the World. That was another pretty intriguing fight, man. World Championship fight here, both undefeated. I don't know too much about Ellis Zorro, but what do you think? It's interesting because I know that the IBF said that if Opataya does go ahead with this fight, pretty much when when the bell goes, he will be stripped because they wanted him to fight his mandatory. I know Eddie Hearn said that they'd reached out to the IBF to say, like, hey, could you not just give us like one fight? This is life-changing money for Opetaya. He really can't, turn this fight down in Saudi Arabia, or we're going to have to relinquish the belt. They haven't really touched on it since. It did sound like the IBF turned around and said no, because they are very strict, aren't they? They're probably one of the ones, if you're, not a big name and you want to work your way into a mandatory position, they're probably the one that you'd want to go with, because they do stick to their laws very stringently. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on fight day. Is he going to be strict? But easy work for Jai Opetaya, regardless of whether he's the IBF champ on that day.
Right.
Yeah, it's an easy victory for him, and then hopefully we'll see him in there, within one of the other cruiserweights, and he gets to, unify. That's
one thing you reminded me of right now. How Matchroom was, trying to talk to the IBF to try to make this happen. Going back really quick, I wanted to get your take on Bam Rodriguez, Sonny Edwards. The Ring Magazine belt was not on the line for that fight, and Julio Cesar Martinez, I guess, got injured or something happened where his fight that was scheduled, he had to postpone or get it. Yeah. So Eddie Hearn was like tweeting at the Ring Magazine, then Dougie Fisher responded to try to convince them to make their Bam Rodriguez and Sonny Edwards a fight for the Ring Magazine title. And people were trying to jump in. I saw Lou DiBella jump in and say, like, hey, you guys aren't some legal agency. You guys are just a magazine. You can bend your rules pretty much. And then Dougie Fisher came on and he was just like, hey, like, we have a Democratic ratings panel who vote. I get it. As a fan, I would have loved to see Bam Rodriguez, Sonny Edwards with the ring title on the line. But you gotta give it to the Ring Magazine and Dougie Fisher as the editor in chief, regardless of what you think about whatever they, Golden Boy being there or whatever. They try to keep it as fair as possible, and Eddie Hearn was trying to, use his weight and his authority to try to get what he wanted. Obviously it helps the promotion of his fight, and there's no sanctioning fee for a Ring Magazine belt. So I was like, oh yeah, like we can get it and it doesn't cost us any money. You got to give it to them, man, because they say like, no, we vote, and it's our rules have always been number one versus number two, and as of right now, this is not, it's unfortunate, but this isn't what it is. I was cool. I thought Dougie Fisher and the Ring Magazine did the right thing and stuck to their guns, even though it would have been cool to see the Ring Magazine title on the line for Bam versus Sonny, but I thought it was the right move to stick to their guns and not cave in to Eddie Hearn and others' pressure like that.
I pretty much agree with you, to be honest with you. I think I like the fact that it's, they vote on it. It's not just made up by, a person or, one.
There's no
people.
Fee.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. Because normally, I think most promoters and most fighters, you look at Tyson Fury and, a lot of other guys, they openly say that, pretty much that the Ring Magazine is who's the best in that division.
Is it because they don't charge a fee though? Like, I mean, that's a pretty big reason too. Like, oh, well, they're the only ones who don't charge me. So maybe that has a lot to do with it.
But I think that works in both ways. It also means they can't be bought, because there's no money exchanging hands. You can't buy a Ring Magazine ranking like you can can we say it? I don't want to get sued.
We've heard some stuff behind the scenes. We've heard,
right.
Yeah.
To be fair, they could sue me. I haven't got much. But I agree with you. I like the fact that it's chosen. Do I agree with it? No. In terms of, I think Bam and Sonny are probably the number one and the number two in that division, due to the fact that Julio Cesar Martinez he moved up to fight. I know it was a couple of years ago, but he moved up to fight Chocolatito. He's had several fights called off. So surely just due to the fact of injury, visa issues, inactivity. To me, I think that Bam and Sonny probably deserve to be number one and number two.
Right.
In my humble opinion.
Right. Yeah. That just wasn't the case at this point. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting take. But I applaud Doug Fisher and the Ring for saying, hey, look, we voted. There's a panel here. This is what happened. Like, we all would love to see it for the Ring Magazine title on the line, but there's rules here. And everybody else were trying to be like, oh, but you guys are just a magazine. Like, you guys aren't some legal authority. Like, I thought that was a pretty, like, underhanded, like,
Little jab.
insult. Yeah, like jab to them. It's just like, oh, okay, then why do you care so much? You know, like,
Right, yeah.
yeah, like why do you care so much then? Like, you know what? Yeah, because it's gonna help the promotion of your fight. Like, yeah, I'm glad they stuck to their guns, man. Yeah, I thought that was the right move to do. You know, regardless if it wasn't popular, I thought that was the right move to do. Going back to the Saudi Arabian card, also on the card, Makhmadov 18-0 goes up against Agit Kabayel 23-0, another undefeated matchup. That's insane right there. Frank Sanchez 23-0 undefeated goes up against Junior Fa 20-2. That's a pretty decent matchup too.
Yeah, both of them really. I think the Makhmadov one's going to be interesting just because he does kind of rely on the fact that he's just so big and so strong. He's limited at times, drops his hands, very basic 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. You know,
Yeah.
Kabayel maybe a little bit of a better boxer, but you know, interesting fight. You know, heavyweights again, 2 undefeated fighters, so that's an interesting one. Yeah, Frank Sanchez kind of seems to be, maybe it's just me, seems to be a little bit active over the last like year or two. He seems to be on,
and he's back with Eddie Reynoso, right?
Yeah, which I think is a good move. I think he should really win that. I think Junior Fa.
I'm surprised I really would love to be in his mind when he left Eddie Reynoso. He obviously followed Ryan Garcia, and then he realized like, yeah, this isn't I should have never done this, and then he came back. You know, like
Probably a decision by. Is he? I don't know if he is, man. Is he a Lupe guy as well?
Maybe you could be right. You could be right, but it's just like I would love to be in his mind, be like when he did that, and then he realized like, oh, this is a stupid idea. I should have never did this. And then he calls Eddie Reynoso back, like, hey, let me come back. You know?
Yeah, I mean, for people who don't know, he left. Reynoso went to Joe Guzan, and then
with Ryan Garcia. That means
Yeah.
that, I mean, you could be right. He could have listened to Ryan Garcia or Lupe Valencia, and then he realized like, oh, this was stupid, and he left. He's like, these guys do not know what they're doing. Then he left. Then he went back to Eddie Reynoso.
Yeah, I mean, like they say about anything, right? The grass isn't always greener. Maybe he went over to realize, like, you know what? Like, I do have a good thing with Eddie. If you just look at the evolution of, you know, Canelo from the stuff that they've taught him over time. If you look at like his head,
even Oscar Valdez.
Yeah, Oscar Valdez as well. Yeah, you could see the stuff that he's done. Julio Cesar Martinez, another one. They have a good stable of fighters over there. So
yeah.
It's gonna be interesting, and I think they probably do need to move Frank a little bit quicker, just due to, you know, his age and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I think Frank Sanchez wins that, you know, fairly easily against Junior Fa.
And then Ryan off the card, Filip Hrgovic, another heavyweight, 16-0 goes up against Mark Demori, 41-2-2. That whole card's pretty solid, man. There's some pretty decent matchups on here.
Yeah, the last one you just said is probably the easiest one to pick. You know, Hrgovic should make pretty easy work of Mark Demori.
He should.
Yeah, our UK listeners will probably recognize Mark Demori. He fought when David Haye moved up to heavyweight. He was one of the opponents that David Haye had. Pretty much built his record over in, you know, foreign countries, all over, just picking up victories, and managed to get himself a payday against Hrgovic, which could be a bad thing. Could get hurt against Hrgovic. So hopefully he's getting paid well.
Exactly. Moving on to news and notes section of this week's episode, the last round. Teofimo Lopez and Jermaine Ortiz are finalizing a deal reportedly for Lopez's WBO junior welterweight title on February 8th in Las Vegas, which is a couple days before the American Football Super Bowl over here in the United States. Obviously, this will be a top rank on ESPN card. It's going to be on a Thursday evening, reportedly. And then the Super Bowl is that same weekend, 3 days later. And I think it's going to be played in the same city as a Super Bowl. So they're trying to capitalize on you know, the people there, you know, the economic impact. So Lopez obviously last fought earlier this summer in June when he beat Josh Taylor via unanimous decision win to become a 2-division champion. So, you know, this is a pretty decent matchup. But
it's not a bad matchup, really. Ortiz is probably
he can fight.
Yeah, he's underrated. You know, if you remember, I think wasn't he the one that retired Jamel Herring?
Yeah, he was. That's true. Yeah.
And then he fought Lomachenko lost to Lomachenko, but gave him a really
it was a good fight. Yeah,
because he was a sparring partner for Lomachenko. So, he was kind of used to that work. He was used to the angles and stuff like that, which probably surprised a lot of fighters. So
yeah,
it's going to be an interesting one just because Teofimo kind of blows hot and cold, right?
Yeah, he's kind of all over the place. So there's no consistency. He's not like a Haney where he's been like, you kind of know what to expect. But yeah, he's kind of hot and cold. So we'll see how he turns out. And then also your favorite fighter of mine, Jake Paul, scored a first round highlight reel knockout of Andre August this past Friday night in Orlando, Florida. I mean, he's trying, man. You got to give it to him. Like, he's trying. I mean, I know people are like, oh, he's not there yet, but he took his loss to Tommy Fury, but now he comes back. Like, he's staying way more active than some of the actual big time professional fighters. Like, regardless of what you think, the guy's trying. I think he's really trying to get into a world title fight, and I could see him getting there. I could see it.
He, if what I read was correct, Andre August was like a 2-time Golden Glove winner as an amateur.
That's insane.
Which just goes to show you like how long he's been boxing. If you look at Jake Paul, he's just a athletic person that turned his hand to boxing because he had a following and realized like, hey, I can make some serious money here by doing pay-per-views and stuff like that. So getting in there with these MMA fighters and boxers and stuff like that, it's still unbelievable. I mean, they're a talented family. Look at his brother Logan.
They're both showing that they're talented. Yeah,
turned his hand to WWE. It was amazing.
Yeah. He's athletic, man. Yeah, you got to give it to them, man. Whatever you think, like, and I know at the beginning, like a couple of years ago, we thought Jake Paul, like, oh, he's just kind of dipping in influencer boxing, but I think he's been proving a lot of boxing fans wrong. Like, I think he's really trying to give it a go. So. That's why we're kind of talking about him right now, because I think he's slowly winning us over in terms of his effort. I mean, you got to give him the credit, man. You got to give it to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us as boxing fans, if you're listening to this, you're obviously a boxing fan. You've got to respect anybody that steps through the ropes, because we've seen some tragedies happen over the last few years, and all respect to him. It's baby steps. Baby steps. I mean, if he's not going to get in there with a Canelo or somewhere like that, but if he really wants to do this, then just work your way up like everybody else. Slowly but surely, fighting someone better every time. Right,
exactly. And then also Edgar Berlanga will return to action on February 24th, also in Orlando, Florida, as he faces Padraig McCrory in the 12-round super middleweight main event. Berlanga, who's 21-0, undefeated with 16 KOs, obviously had a lot of hype behind him when he was under Top Rank. Now he's with Matchroom, but he had, in his first 16 wins, he had 16 straight first-round stoppages. But in his last 5 fights, he's gone the distance. Obviously, the level of talent goes up, so that kind of, it's always hard to maintain that KO power like that. It's rare, but. Yeah, he's not. What can we really say? This is obviously trying to be like a showcase fight to try to get him in. Yeah, which
he's had a gifted career.
Yeah, for up to now. Yeah, but Top Rank pretty much couldn't make a deal with him. So
it was interesting because this fight got announced, and Eddie Hearn and some of the guys from the UK was watching some of the interviews, and they were talking about how Padraig McCrory is. He's known as the Hammer. He's heavy-handed, and he's all wrong for Berlanga. And he's 18 wins, 9 KOs. Like,
right.
I was thinking to myself, I was like, oh Jesus, he must have like a whole host of knockouts. 50%.
Yeah.
And some of those ones like that he didn't knock out were early on in his career. And those are the ones where really you'd think he would be blowing people away. Kind of like Berlanga did, but. Ever since signing with Matchroom, he's just been given, some fairly, Jason Quigley. He beat him on points. He's got obviously Padraig McCrory. I'm assuming Berlanga will, probably win that. And then you'd think after that, Matchroom are going to be like, okay, we need to make some money back from you now because we've given you a couple of gimmies. And then I would imagine they'll probably try to face him with Canelo or maybe even feed him to Diego Pacheco.
Oof. Yeah. I can. Yeah, we talked about this before. So, I mean, yeah, this isn't really up and out of your seat type of matchup here. But I think
the American fans are going to have absolutely no idea who McCrory is.
Yeah. I think Matchroom and Eddie Hearn and DAZN are just trying to figure out, like, okay, let's just throw him in there just to kind of see what we could see. I'm assuming they're going to have local Florida fighters on there to fill the seats. Right, yeah. But, you also got to see, like, okay, let's see what type of Berlanga we get. This fight is really going to dictate what they do moving forward, because if this fight goes the distance and he doesn't, perform as they want him to, they're gonna the next fight after that, they're gonna have to think like, okay, we can't put him in there with like a Pacheco or even mention Canelo or any of these other big names because he's not nearly ready for that. So this fight is important, man. He's already over 20 wins and he's undefeated, but it's like he's like 9-0. If you think about it. Yeah, I mean, he must sell tickets or something because of the way that he's been slowly wrapped in cotton wool and looked after, right? Yeah, but Top Rank and ESPN also, they built his profile. So, like, that's why when he became a free agent, Golden Boy, Matchroom, all these guys try to sign him because they're like, hey, we can at least try to make some money with this guy, even if we don't think has the talent to back it up. Like, we can get some type of money out of it because Top Rank and ESPN already built some type of profile that we can work off of. Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of like Matchroom, I think Diego Pacheco or maybe Canelo when, his PBC deal is done. I'm sure he'll return to Matchroom. He seems to like Eddie Hearn. So I think it'll just depend on that. And depending on how much money they've invested in Berlanga, maybe they need that Canelo purse to kind of get some return on, what they've invested. If it's not as much, maybe they go, you know what, like the Canelo fight's too distant. Let's stick him in there with Pacheco. And then the winner of that, ends up getting Canelo down the line. But I mean, I was chatting to Diego Pacheco at his last fight and, he said, he's like, I've been trying to get, Berlanga, but, it didn't work out this time. And he would like him, the early part of, 2024, but obviously, Berlanga has a fight. I can see it, but also you also got to look at it like, Matchroom and Eddie Hearn are probably looking at it like, we don't, they want to keep both happy right now and they don't want to get to that fight unless they really have to because they both have them signed. Right, exactly. Business. Yeah, business, exactly. So we'll see, but that is an interesting matchup in the future. Hopefully that happens. But once again, guys, we appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode of the Last Round podcast. We're coming up on the holiday season, especially over here in the United States. So it's probably going to be maybe we've got to see what the schedule is the next couple of weeks, but could be a quiet end of the year here for boxing. But we'll check it out and see what we can produce for you guys. But before we completely sign off, once again, Mike, go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us. At The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to join us next week. We'll be reviewing the big card from Saudi Arabia, and it's nearly that time of year. Everyone's favorite episode, the hardest boxing quiz in the world. We'll be back either next week or maybe the week after for a bonus episode. Yeah, we got to lock down our guests. We've been talking to some people, but we got to lock down some guests for that fight. You got to get the quiz going. I know you've been working on it, so we will see. So once again, for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.